I suppose I was going to start with the idea of obviously a successful businessman and a family man and live around the area. So why on earth get into politics?
I think the trigger absolutely was the banking crisis. I sat there watching, thinking all these banks are going to go bust, and well, what have they been up to? Great. I realised that companies that go bust usually have been inefficient and irresponsible, overstretched themselves. Some it could be a victim of circumstance, but when they bailed them out, I was just absolutely shocked. I just thought that this is something terribly wrong going on here, that especially from the Labour government doing that, to then bail out the banks. It just said to me, well, you see who actually runs the country. It's the banks. And for the first time, suddenly it all came into sharp focus. What was going on out there? They didn't sort of help people. They weren't saying, "Oh, we're going to stimulate growth. We're going to help people stay in their jobs and their homes and stuff." No, it just all went to the bank. That's why we've got this massive debt. We wouldn't have had that debt without the bank. So we loaned the banks money, and now we owe a huge debt. How does that work out? Surely when the bank loans you money, they don't end up with the debt, do they? No, it's you who has the debt. So I don't know who did that deal for us, but it's very fishy.
We didn't come out well from it. So why this party? Because obviously if you go into politics, most people are drawn by the main three. So had you been involved in politics before?
No, not really. I mean, I voted from the age of 18. I voted, I think it would have been Margaret Thatcher the first time round, on the back of all the strikes that were happening and the horrible situation you had in the 70s. I just thought this lot have got it completely around the wrong way. Voted for her once, and then I think Major possibly the next time. I think I missed one for whatever reason, and then when Tony Blair came in, I was his man. I just got taken in hook, line and sinker, really, and I thought, great, this is the sort of person that we need. And then very quickly it became apparent that he wasn't doing what he said he was going to do, and he was following some other agenda. I don't know quite what it is. I could probably say what it is now, but and then I'd never thought that they should take us into the war, that sort of thing. I thought this is wrong here somewhere. And it's none of our business. We keep interfering overseas, and we've been interfering, especially America's been interfering in the Middle East, going back 50, 60 years, with, they deposed the elected president of Iran and put in the Shah, and that caused all the animosity that brought about the Islamic sort of revolution over there. And I went to school. There were a lot of Iranian students at my college in Norfolk around that time. A lot of them who had either left in haste in 78, 79, 80, or ones that were in support of him. But they all agreed they didn't like what was coming in, but they absolutely detested the Shah, which I thought was quite strange, because he'd always been portrayed as somebody who was very friendly to the West, which you thought, well, that's good. If he's friends with us, he can't be bad, can he? How these things turn around.
Right, so and how did they link up with the English Democrats? Because it's been a party for quite some time.
I think 78, I think. 98, 1998, yes. And I think it was started out of, people feeling that the English were only not getting represented, but were actually being overridden. It doesn't even get mentioned. The word English doesn't even get mentioned anymore, which seems a very strange thing. But I'd looked around, and obviously, I just realised that most of the main parties are exactly the same, and saw that they were a continuation of the other. I saw that Tony Blair was a continuation of what had been before, when I thought he was going to turn things round. And I remember saying to myself, I thought, I'll vote for Tony Blair because I've done all right. This is only a small company. There's 4 employees, and that's it. And my mother, 76, works for us as well. My wife does some part-time work here, and that's it. And I thought, well, okay, I'm okay. Let's do something for the people who don't have as much. And once I started on that route, I started to support Labour, and just Tony Blair. Just in voting for them, I didn't really have any sort of political involvement. But then I just realised that they are all the same. No matter what happens, we're still trying to resolve the same problems that were around when I was at school. The education is the same thing. It's the health service, same thing. It's all poor service, and kids aren't reading and writing and adding up. and it just seemed it was all the same things I had when I was growing up. So it seemed to me that nothing was changing, you know. And therefore, they must be a continuation of each other, like the directors of a company changing round, you know, just because they're unpopular with the workers, they shuffle a few people in, and it's the same corporation going forward. Is the analogy I like to give. And that's basically it. So I looked around, and of course it was none of the top three parties, and I thought, well, I'd like an English Parliament. It does seem we're being, you know, shoved to one side. There seems to be an agenda against, nationalism, if you like to call it that, or anybody who's actually, you know, thinks of themselves in a national sense. Yet the Scottish, National Party has come into being, and they've got a Parliament. You've got the Welsh Assembly, the Irish Assembly, and it just seemed grossly unfair that we didn't also have our Parliament. I think we're the only country in the world that doesn't have its own Parliament, the only sovereign nation.
Yeah, I mean that's the key issue of the party.
Yes.
The idea that since devolution in '98, I mean I don't know if it's too simplistic to say, but the idea that Scottish MPs have their say over English matters.
Yes.
English MPs, or English-based MPs, have no say over certain issues in Scotland.
Yes.
And is that right to say? Is that fair to?
I think that is, yes. And I think even if you're in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, I think you can actually vote in our elections as well.
Right.
So something's a bit askew, but I think this is all. I look at it in the Barnett formula, where Scotland gets a disproportionately larger amount of government finance than we do in the south. I always think they're more sweeteners to keep the union together. That seems to be what that is all about. When we've seen that empires and groups of countries never work. People always want their own self-determination. It's much fairer on the people that are there. You keep the big government machinery out of the way, and basically you compete across borders. I'm for Scotland. I'm for Wales. I think it's great. I mean, if Scotland hasn't got as much business going on up there, then why can't they lower their taxes? Why can't they lower their business rates? Why can't they attract business up there? But under EU rules, as I understand it, they're not allowed to to outcompete, by doing these things. It's like a uniform tax system, which just plays into the hand of big governments and big corporations, and we've seen they can't run themselves. So,
is part of the problem, I suppose, that there isn't the will of the English to self-determine. I mean, you see it obviously at World Cups and sort of patriotic occasions like that, but is part of the problem the fact that the English are just fairly content already, or do you sense a sort of change in mood?
No, I've got a little bit more of a slant to it than that. I think it's the expression I like is we've been lulled to sleep, right. By the good times, by all of the the sort of the feel-good factor of people doing all right and spending money on whatever they wanted, getting into debt. It's all it's all like an enormous high, a big party that's carried on, and you've actually got to at some point turn round and face the music, and that's what I think they swept in on. I'm trying to think which president it was who said that. I think it was Eisenhower in his farewell address. He said what we need is an alert and informed public to guard against the military-industrial complex. I mean, if that was it, he had to say it in his exit address, because it wasn't anything he could possibly say while he's in power. And they couldn't stop him doing it. It's a very famous speech he gave, and that's what I think has happened. And for Gordon Brown to say there would be no more return to, I don't know, he put Tory boom and bust in there, but to say that, I mean, to someone who had studied economics, it was just crazy, because it was bound to happen. You can't, the boom is always going to end up in a bust. It's got to, yeah. And the business cycle is caused by central banks and government interference, and that's the problem.